In this last recording for Unit 3, I want to show you how to use slicers. If you've been following along, this should be fairly simple. If you haven't, you should be able to follow along this recording by doing one simple thing. Open the Unit 3 sample file. I already have mine open. And add a table to the faculty data. To do that, you just simply click inside the data, do Insert Table, and you should be able to follow along. It's nice if you have the pivot tables available as well, but if you don't, you won't be able to follow along with that part, but you should be able to get the general idea of slicers. If you have any filtering being done here, you might want to clear the filters, so the easy way to do that is under Sort A to Z on the Home tab. Just do the clear on filters. Mine are already gone. Right. And now we can insert some slicers. Really what slicers are is just another more visual way of inserting or adding filters to your data, to your tables, or to your pivot tables, or to your pivot charts. So as you already know, we could go in here and for the department say I want to filter and only show accounting and finance, leave the management out of it. That's not too hard to do, but slicers, provide an easier way of doing that. I'm going to clear those filters one more time. Here's the clear, and now I have all my data set to go. To insert a slicer for a table, simply go to the Insert tab and insert a slicer. Alternatively, you can go to Table Tools Design and insert a slicer. They both do exactly the same thing. So since I'm here, I'm going to use this one. And when you insert a slicer, what Excel first wants to know is by which fields in your table, they're looking at the fields up across the top here, do you want to provide slicers for, filters for. So I think I will do year hired and sex. Gives me two of them. Can drag them around and park them where I want them to go. And now I can resize these. This one's kind of wide. I've got a little extra space here. I don't need all that space, so I can resize them. Let's keep going until I get dots and then come back a little bit. That looks pretty good. And then I can stretch it down so I can see all the years without scrolling. Looks like I still have a screen split here, but that shouldn't matter. So scroll, there's the bottom of my slicer. I'll just pull that back up again. Now normally your screen will be a little bigger, you shouldn't have this much trouble. Now I've resized my slicer to show all the distinct values. That's what slicers do. It's kind of like a pivot table. When we created our pivot table, we created row and column headings that grabbed the unique values from the table and added them to the rows and columns. Here with slicers, it looks in this column, finds all the unique year hired, and adds them to my slicer. Finds all the unique values for sex and adds them to my slicer. Shrink this one down. Notice I grab the lower right hand corner. That allows me to shrink it in two directions. The book will often ask you to place these in a certain position like L2. You can just drag them and that's not bad, but a way to get them in there exactly is to cut them to the clipboard. Click in L2 and paste. And now it's in the upper left hand corner of L2, no guessing required. Slicers, like everything else, can be formatted, so with my slicer selected, I'm going to go to the Slicer Tools options and pick one that kind of matches the table over here and do the same thing for year hired. One of the things the book doesn't mention is that you can change the sort order here. So if I want the most recent hires at the top, I can click in this slicer. I got a little carried away there. Click in this slicer to select it and then go to the slicer settings. That's in Slicer Tools options. Go to the slicer settings and tell it I want the values that it found sorted in descending order. And now they're the other way around. You can do the same thing here, and you can use those slicer settings to change a few other things. To use these slicers is just like filtering. Instead of dropping down the arrow, you just say I want 2008. And the table itself is then filtered. This slicer is tied to that table. It's actually tied to this little filter. It's just a more visual way of showing which values you're currently showing. I can mix and match these. I can now go to the filter button and say, you know what, I want to see 2009 as well. And now I've got 2 years. It's actually, and notice now both years are selected over here. It's actually easier to select multiple values from these filter buttons than it is from the slicers, but once you know the trick, it's not so bad. when you click in a slicer, you get 1 year. So if I click, I get 2008. If I want multiple years, I have to hold the control key down and then click, and I get both of them. Now I have 8s and 9s. Right? I can sort my table in different ways. That's a control key. You can also use the shift key. So I'm going to select 2008 and then shift 2011. And that selects everybody in between. It shows me the people who have been hired between the years 2008 and 2011, inclusive. So I can do many. Anytime you want to, there's a clear the filters button up here. That's a little easier than clearing the filters there or going up here to clear the filters. Notice that my cursor is not in here. Once my cursor is in the table, then this clear filter is there. So you can clear them here, you can clear them here. You can clear it lots of different ways, but this one's, again, probably the most convenient. Just click on it, and it again selects all the years. You can mix and match. If I only want to see the females highlighted or hired from 2008 to 2011, choose 2008, shift-click 2011, and click females, and now I've only got females who were hired in those years. And notice that this filter here is hiding the values for which there are no values, or hiding the values for which nothing exists. Now let's go over to the pivot tables, and we can add slicers here to filter this if we wish. So I'm going to add a slicer for the gender over here. Now my screen is kind of small, so I'm running a little out of space here, but I can close the pivot table fields area. I can always bring that back later by going to the design, analyze, and bring the field list back. So I can get rid of those to hide them for my slicer example. And let's say I want to eliminate certain ranks here, so I'm going to add a slicer. Again, I can go to Insert, or I can go to Analyze. Here's the Insert Slicer. And it says, what are you interested in? I'm interested in rank. And again, I can add as many slicers as I want. Park that over here. Resize it. Format it so that it kind of looks like the rest of the stuff in dark red. Okay. And now I have one of these, and as I click on them, it filters my pivot table, which filters automatically my chart. I can control click to add things. Again, very, very easy to add slicers. It makes it a little easier to filter versus these buttons. Notice this button shows a filter. And if we look, the instructors and the full instructors are not included. Okay, the full professors are not included. So again, very easy to add a slicer, but their primary purpose is simply to filter the data that you see on the screen. Either your pivot tables or your data tables can be filtered using a slicer. Very nice when you're doing presentations using charts to hide and show data dynamically, particularly if the audience has questions. What happens if we add 2006 to the mix? Right. Then we can see those results right away. Very powerful tool and very easy to use.